My daughter-in-law called me an old witch at the wedding, then I exposed her secret scams, fake pregnancy, and forged documents to take back everything she tried to steal from me and my son. When she saw her empire crumble, the shock on her face was the sweetest revenge of all. I stood beneath the chandelier, clutching the lace edges of my borrowed shawl, when my daughter-in-law's voice tore through the music like glass shattering against tile. Who let the old witch in? I thought this was a classy event. Laughter rippled around the reception hall, hesitant at first, then bolder as guests turned to look at me, some stifling smirks, others pretending not to notice. My son, Nathan, stood frozen beside his new wife, his champagne glass mid-air, not even meeting my eyes. And just like that, I became invisible, except for the sting of humiliation burning into my skin. No one helped. No one spoke. Just me, the witch, and the crushing silence that followed mockery. But they forgot something. Witches don't die. We wait. It was supposed to be a happy day, Nathan and Alina's grand reception, hosted in a lavish ballroom with silver-draped tables and live violins. I had begged Alina to let me wear something modest, to sit quietly, to not disrupt anything. Just be invisible, she had said with a sugar-sweet smile the week before. I took her words to heart. But apparently, invisibility wasn't enough. The worst part wasn't the insult. It wasn't even the laughter. It was the rehearsed cruelty in Alina's voice, like she had planned it. Like this had been waiting for the perfect audience. And that's when I knew. Alina wanted to humiliate me. Not just by calling me names. No, she wanted to destroy me, erase me from my own son's life like I was a shameful stain. But what she didn't know was that in my silence, I had been watching. In my invisibility, I had seen things. Taken screenshots. Gathered whispers. And now, I had something even more powerful than revenge, the truth. Alina wasn't who she claimed to be. The expensive lifestyle? Stolen. The designer bag? A knockoff. Her glamorous influencer career? Propped up by lies, sugar daddies, and a very married businessman whose wife had no idea. That night, I left the reception early, no one stopped me. Not even Nathan. But I wasn't broken. I was busy. Busy unzipping a hidden pocket of memories. Busy planning my return. By morning, a secret folder named "For the Public" was ready. I just needed the right time. The right audience. And a stage even grander than her wedding. And trust me, I would get it. Because witches don't die. We transform. If you've ever been humiliated by someone you trusted, if you've ever stayed quiet while your heart shattered, then please, like, share, and subscribe. I want to know, where are you from? Tell me, because somewhere out there, another woman is listening right now, whispering, "Me too." This story is for her. I didn't sleep that night. Not a second. I sat at the small wooden desk in my dimly lit bedroom, the same one Nathan used to scribble his spelling tests on when he was little, the corners still carved with the shaky letters, N+M, inside a heart. I thought about that as I opened the dusty laptop I hadn't touched in months. I thought about how my boy used to look up at me like I was a queen, how his little arms used to wrap around my waist without needing a reason. And then I thought about how he had stood there just hours ago while his bride, his perfectly dressed, vicious bride, called me a witch in front of 200 guests, and he didn't even flinch. I hadn't been allowed to sit at the family table. Alina told the planner I'd feel more comfortable in the back, right next to the kitchen doors, where the servers nearly knocked over my water every time they passed. I was just the woman who raised him alone after his father died in a car crash. The woman who scrubbed toilets and cooked in diners to make sure he had clothes that weren't too small. And now, I was a burden, something old and shameful, something to hide behind chandeliers and marbled columns. But I wasn't always invisible. In fact, I had once worked as an investigator's assistant back in the late 70s, before I married Nathan's father. I'd been trained to spot lies. I could still sniff deceit in perfume and high heels. Alina had fooled Nathan, but not me. Her lies were stitched into every inch of her presence, from her fake resume to her branding agency that never existed. I had watched her carefully for 2 years, ever since I first caught her whispering on the phone in a bathroom during Nathan's birthday party, saying, "He has no idea I'm still seeing Martin." Martin, as in Martin Castillo, the married CEO whose wife once visited our church bake sale. A man known for shady overseas accounts and even shadier habits. I had taken pictures. I had copied chat logs when she left her iPad open. I had followed the trails, the fake charities she'd donated to in order to claim tax benefits on Nathan's income. All of it, every lie, every face she wore, was saved in a single encrypted folder titled for the public. I hadn't planned on ever using it. Honestly, I thought Nathan would eventually see it himself, and I wouldn't have to lift a finger. But after tonight, after that public branding of me as something grotesque, something to laugh at, I knew I had waited long enough. I stared at my computer screen with tears threatening to spill but didn't let them fall. I began typing a message draft with a simple title, "What the World Doesn't Know About Elpalla Carter." I didn't send it yet. I wanted it timed. I wanted it to hit when it would sting the hardest, when her mask was still fresh from the wedding glow, when everyone still believed she was the perfect new bride. I imagined it like lighting a match in a room full of perfume. Just one flick and the whole image would go up in flames. But I wasn't just doing this for me. That's what I kept telling myself. I was doing it for Nathan too. He had been slowly fading since he met her, his joy replaced with anxiety, his warmth swallowed by the performance of being her husband. I saw it in his posture, in the way he avoided my gaze when she was near, in how he stopped calling me Mom, and started saying Margaret like I was a guest in his life. She had him convinced he needed her approval to be respected. She manipulated him so elegantly that even his breath started matching hers. I clicked through the folder again, pictures of Elpalla with Martin in a hotel lobby in Atlanta, screenshots of transactions to offshore accounts under a fake nonprofit, audio recordings from her phone conversations that I had stitched together with time stamps. It wasn't just scandalous, it was criminal. I knew this wouldn't just end her reputation. If it landed in the right hands, it could mean an investigation, charges, even jail. But I didn't feel guilty. Not anymore. Not after she laughed while I stood frozen in shame, guests nudging each other and whispering behind their champagne flutes. Not after she took the boy I raised and rewrote him into a stranger. This wasn't revenge. This was a reckoning. The only thing I still hadn't decided was how to release it. Should I post it anonymously? Should I send it to the influencer gossip accounts she adored so much? Or should I make it even more poetic, wait until her bridal magazine feature goes live, and then let the truth detonate beneath the cover story? One thing was certain, Elpalla thought she had won. She thought she'd banished the old woman to the shadows for good. But she had made one mistake. She humiliated someone who had nothing left to lose, and that's the most dangerous kind of enemy. Because witches don't burn. We light the match. 2 days after the wedding, while social media still buzzed with filtered photos and drone-shot videos of the floral canopy, I received an anonymous delivery, a single slice of their wedding cake in a crystal box, sealed with a gold ribbon. No note. No signature. Just that overpriced confection, sent like a reminder of where I stood, outside their story, forgotten but not quite gone. I stared at it for a long while, the pale pink icing frozen in time, the delicate sugar rose perched like a crown, and I understood the message. She was taunting me. Elpalla knew exactly what she had done. She wanted to rub it in, to remind me that she had married into the family and I had been cast out like rotting fruit. I should have thrown it away, but instead, I placed the box in the fridge, because part of me knew I'd need it later. Not the cake, but the pettiness. The arrogance. The moment she crossed into her own downfall, I wanted to remember exactly how smug she had been before the storm came. But as I set it aside, something gnawed at my gut. Something wasn't right. Because that delivery meant she knew where I lived, and I had moved 6 months ago. Nathan didn't have the new address. I'd kept it quiet on purpose, ever since Elpalla made that comment at Easter about how my ugly furniture depressed the room. Only one person knew where I'd moved. A woman named Grace, the cleaner I'd hired once a week. But Grace didn't even have my full name, just Maggie on a cash envelope. So who had leaked my location? I didn't want to believe it, but the thought was already pressing against my chest like a stone. Nathan. He had to have found my address and given it to her, or worse, she had pressured it out of him. I felt my throat tighten. It wasn't just betrayal anymore, it was surveillance. She wasn't just trying to humiliate me. She was trying to track me. And suddenly, the room didn't feel safe. I checked the windows. I checked the back door. Then I powered off my laptop, pulled out a tiny USB stick where I'd backed up the For the Public folder, and slipped it into my bra. I wasn't paranoid. I was prepared. Because if Alina was capable of public cruelty, private cruelty wasn't far behind. The next day, I visited a place I hadn't stepped into in nearly a decade, the county records office. I wore a wide hat, sunglasses, and a scarf, not because I thought anyone would recognize me, but because I needed to feel hidden. Safe. I spent 3 hours combing through documents linked to Alina Carter, business filings, property deeds, nonprofit affiliations. One line stood out. A dormant LLC registered to her maiden name, Alina Vexler. Not Carter. The company name? Lightwell Outreach International. The same fake nonprofit I'd traced in her transaction history. But here was the twist I hadn't expected, it was co-signed by someone else. Marion Greer. That name hit me like a slap. Marion had been a bridesmaid. A sweet, soft-spoken woman I remembered vaguely from the reception, the one who gave a nervous toast about friendship through thick and thin. I had even seen her helping Alina with her makeup in the dressing room. And now it made sense. Alina wasn't alone. She had help. I left the office with my mind spinning. This was deeper than I thought. There was a web. And it wasn't just about lies or fraud anymore, it was about control. She wanted full ownership of Nathan. Financially, emotionally, legally. The more I dug, the more I realized she was tightening the leash. She had recently become joint signer on Nathan's investment account. She had begun the process of changing their house deed into a trust, something most people do for tax planning, yes, but also something that could isolate him financially if things turned sour. I needed to act before she wrapped him in legal chains he couldn't escape from. Back home, I opened a burner email and sent an encrypted link to the For the Public folder to a trusted contact, Elijah, a journalist I'd worked with back in the early days when I still did clerical digging for investigations. I didn't explain much. Just typed, "If anything happens to me, release this." It felt melodramatic. Until I remembered that slice of wedding cake, the eerie silence of my phone, the way Nathan hadn't called once, not even to check if I got home safe after the wedding. Something had shifted. I could feel it in my bones, the same way I used to feel thunderstorms before they cracked open the sky. That evening, I walked to my mailbox and found a white envelope addressed in careful script, Margaret. No return address. Inside, a printed photo. Blurry but clear enough to see, Alina, in a hotel lobby, embracing Martin Castillo. It wasn't from my collection. Someone else had sent it. Someone watching. Someone who wanted her exposed too. My fingers trembled as I turned the photo over. One word, handwritten on the back, more. I stared at the word on the back of that photo, more, until my fingers cramped around the paper and my throat felt raw from breathing too fast. Someone knew. Someone out there had been watching Alina just like I had, maybe even longer, and they wanted me to know they were watching me too. Was it a warning? A signal? A threat? My mind raced through the possibilities, trying to place faces to the handwriting, replaying the wedding reception in slow motion. Who was near me, who watched the humiliation unfold, who looked away too quickly? I couldn't remember. But the feeling that crept over me wasn't fear. It was familiarity. Because I knew that kind of message. I had sent one just like it years ago to a man who thought no one knew what he did to his secretary after hours. It was the kind of breadcrumb that said, "You're not alone. You're not crazy." Keep going. I tucked the photo into the back of my notebook and did something I hadn't done in years. I went to the window, pulled the curtain just slightly, and stared out at the street, scanning every car, every movement, looking for someone watching me. And that's when I saw him. A man in a gray coat, standing just far enough from the edge of my yard that it wasn't suspicious, yet close enough that I could make out his stance, rigid, still, facing me. He didn't have a phone in his hand. He wasn't pretending to walk a dog or jog or take a call. He was just there. Like he was waiting. The moment my eyes met his through the glass, he turned and walked away. Not fast. Not slow. Just a steady, confident exit, like he knew I'd seen him and that was enough. I didn't chase him. I didn't need to. Because I recognized something in his posture too. The way he didn't flinch. The way he made sure I saw him before leaving. He wasn't threatening me. He was testing me. And I'd passed. This wasn't over. Not even close. By the next morning, my mind had shifted into war mode. I no longer felt like an old woman wronged by her son's new wife. I felt like someone preparing for battle. I pulled out every document, photo, transaction record I had on Alina. I separated them into piles: financial fraud, infidelity, character lies, and finally, emotional manipulation of Nathan. That last one was the hardest to organize because emotional abuse is so often invisible, but I had pieces. Texts she had sent him that had once shown me in tears, then tried to laugh off later. Voicemails I recorded when she screamed at him over missing a dinner reservation. And then there was the charity gala where I overheard her tell a friend, "He's so easy to control, it's like training a dog with money and guilt." That had been the first time I started documenting things. It was a cold night in October, and I had stood outside the tent, shaking, recording her voice with my phone as tears ran down my cheeks, not from pain, but from clarity. That was the moment I realized I had lost my son, not to love, but to manipulation. And now I was getting him back, piece by piece. That same day, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. I answered, and a voice on the other end said, "You don't know me, but I know Alina. She destroyed someone I love. And I want to help." The woman never gave her name. She told me to call her 7. Said she had files, real proof, beyond what I had. Said she knew about the offshore accounts, and more importantly, she had access to the private cloud where Alina stored all her documents, voice memos, and chats. I didn't ask how. I didn't care. Desperation and justice are cousins. I simply said, "Send it." An hour later, I received a secure link that required a password. The code? Margaret deserves truth. I clicked it, and what opened was a floodgate. Videos of Alina mocking Nathan's childhood photos, joking that orphans make great puppets, mocking me as the crone who thinks she matters, even practicing the insults she hurled at me at the reception. That's when it hit me, it was scripted. She had planned to humiliate me. The insult about the old witch wasn't off the cuff. It was rehearsed. She had practiced it, tweaked the tone, tested the laugh afterward. I watched in numb disbelief as she performed for her phone camera, playing with her wedding makeup kit, saying, "You think anyone will care? She'll cry, maybe leave, and Nathan won't do a damn thing. He's too weak." Then she laughed. A laugh that chilled me to the bone. I closed the laptop slowly and sat in silence, hands in my lap, watching the clock tick toward midnight. My ears rang from holding my breath. I wasn't imagining it. I hadn't exaggerated. I hadn't overreacted. She wanted to erase me from my son's life, and she thought she could do it with words, with mockery, with power. But what she didn't count on was this: witches remember everything. And now I had witnesses. I wasn't the only one who saw the rot beneath her mask. There were others. Watching. Waiting. Gathering. And soon, the world would too. The morning I decided to expose her wasn't dramatic. No thunderstorm. No dream. No final straw. It was just the sound of my kettle whistling and the bitter taste of stale coffee. I sat at the kitchen table, watching the video on repeat, Alina rehearsing the exact insults she used against me at the wedding, smiling into her phone like she was auditioning for a villain's role in a soap opera. "She looks like something scraped off a mausoleum," she giggled, flicking her hair. "I want the guests to feel embarrassed for her. That's the kind of shame that sticks." And then she winked, a slow, smug wink that crawled into my skin like frostbite. That was it. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I simply stood up, walked to my closet, and pulled out the dusty metal box hidden behind old sweaters. Inside were the letters Nathan wrote me from college, the ones where he said, "You're my whole world, Mom." I read the one he wrote the day he met Alina. "She's electric," it said. "And for some reason, she sees something in me." That sentence haunted me. It wasn't love he felt, it was worship. She had found his wound, the part of him that never healed from growing up fatherless and watching me scrape together a life from nothing. She fed that hunger and turned it into leash and collar. I spent the rest of the day stitching together a short film. Not just a data dump, no, I wanted it to feel like a documentary, a revelation, something no one could ignore. I started with wedding clips. Slow pans of the floral arrangements, the vows, the kiss, the toast. Then I sliced in the audio of her mocking Nathan's childhood. The insults. The fake charities. The rehearsal of her public attack on me. And finally, a soft, trembling voiceover, my voice, speaking calmly over images of my home, my late husband's grave, a birthday photo of Nathan with icing on his nose. "My name is Margaret, and I raised a son with nothing but grit and prayer. I stood by him through every scraped knee and broken heart. And on the happiest day of his life, his wife humiliated me on purpose, because she thought no one would ever dare expose her." The video was exactly 7 minutes long. 7 minutes of silence broken. 7 minutes that would flip her world upside down. But I didn't upload it. Not yet. Because I wanted the perfect moment, and I found it. That evening, a gossip blog posted a teaser for a feature article titled, "Alina Carter, America's Newest Influencer Bride." The preview included a glossy photo of her in the wedding gown, smiling with fake modesty, holding Nathan's hand like it was a prop. The article promised an inside look at her business genius and charitable heart. I laughed, loud, sharp, bitter. That's when I made my decision. I created a burner Instagram account, uploaded the video with the caption, "Before you believe the fairy tale, watch this." I didn't tag her. I didn't need to. I simply waited. And it didn't take long. Within hours, the video had over 20,000 views. Comments poured in. "Is this real? I always knew something felt off about her. This woman deserves justice." Then, the hashtag started, hashtag exposing Alina, hashtag wedding witch truth, hashtag justice for Margaret. It spread faster than I could refresh. By midnight, 3 major wedding forums had shared the video. A YouTube channel known for influencer exposés uploaded a breakdown titled, "Alina Carter, From Perfect Bride to Calculated Fraud." I watched as everything she had carefully built, every fake follower, every manipulated image, every bought spotlight, began to unravel in real time. But what I didn't expect was what came next. Because at 1:13 a.m. my phone rang. Not Alina. Not Nathan. Not even 7. It was a man. His voice low, strained, almost trembling. "Mrs. Hargrove, my name is John Castillo. I'm Martin's brother." I froze. "I saw the video," he said. "And I need to meet with you. There's something you should know about what Alina did to my family. About what she's still doing." I said nothing. Just nodded as if he could see me. He gave me an address. A diner on the edge of town. "Noon tomorrow." "She ruined more than just reputations," he said before hanging up. "She ruins lives." I didn't sleep. Not from fear, there was none left in me. but from the quiet knowledge that I had just lit a match that would burn down more than one house. The truth had claws now. And it wasn't just clawing at Alina, it was clawing at something deeper, something I hadn't even touched yet. Because if Martin's brother had come forward, what else had she buried? What secret still lived in the shadow of that wedding? I didn't know. But I would find out. Because witches don't rest. We rise. The diner was one of those places frozen in time, peeling vinyl booths, faded photographs of celebrity lookalikes on the walls, and a jukebox that hadn't worked since the 90s. I chose the corner booth, back against the wall, facing the door like I used to when Nathan was little, and I still thought I could protect him from the world just by watching it closer. I got there early, ordered nothing but coffee, and waited, my mind flicking through every possible scenario. Was this a trap, a warning, a trick? But when the door finally creaked open, the man who stepped inside didn't look like a threat. He looked tired. Tired in the way grief wears a man down to bone. John Castillo was taller than I imagined, but his shoulders curved inward like a question mark, like the weight he carried had bent him over time. He spotted me instantly and walked over without hesitation, no smile, no greeting, just a slight nod as he slid into the seat across from me and pulled something from his coat, a phone, scratched and old. This, he said, setting it between us like a dead thing, belonged to my brother. I didn't speak. I watched his fingers trace the edge of the phone like it held a pulse. Martin was no saint, John began, voice flat. But he wasn't a fool either. He kept records. Messages. Photos. Proof. He glanced up at me, eyes bloodshot but sharp. Your daughter-in-law wasn't just his mistress. She was his partner, in something much darker than adultery. My stomach clenched. What do you mean? I asked. John unlocked the phone, pulled up a file marked with a single letter, A. He turned the screen to me and played the first voice memo. Alina's voice, cold and clinical. You get them hooked on the investments, then threaten exposure if they pull out. Simple. Fear is the currency. Martin, don't get sloppy again. I recoiled. They were running blackmail? He nodded. Tech entrepreneurs, foreign investors, even clergy. She'd charm them, trap them, and Martin would clean up the mess. But toward the end, he started getting scared. He told me he thought she was planning something permanent. My fingers tightened around my coffee cup. He thought she was going to kill him? John didn't answer, just tapped another audio clip, Martin's voice now, rambling in panic. If anything happens to me, it's her. Alina. She said she'd ruin me if I backed out. Said my wife would find out the wrong way. I don't know what she's capable of anymore. I sat in stunned silence, the diner sounds fading around us. Why are you showing me this? I whispered. John's jaw clenched. Because 2 weeks after that recording, Martin was found dead in his hotel room. Cardiac arrest, they said. But I don't buy it. And now your video is bringing attention. People are talking. And I think you might be the only person alive who has the guts to keep pushing. I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of something massive shifting under my feet. You want me to expose her not just for cruelty or fraud, but for murder. He hesitated, then leaned in. I want justice. And I think you do too. But it won't be clean. She's protected. Money. Lawyers. Illusions. She'll turn it all against you if you don't move carefully. I opened my bag and pulled out the flash drive labeled for the public, slid it toward him. Then we moved together. He didn't take it. Just stared at it like it might burn his skin. You already know she's evil, I said. But now you need to understand, she's desperate. And people like her? They're most dangerous when they know they're cornered. By the time I walked home, the clouds had thickened and the sky sagged like it couldn't hold its weight. I stepped through my front door and immediately sensed it. Something was wrong. My picture frames had shifted. A drawer left slightly open. My breath caught. I walked to the kitchen and found it. A single red lipstick kiss on my mirror. No note. No sign of entry. Just that mark, like a warning from a predator marking her territory. I stood frozen for a full minute before grabbing my phone and calling Elijah, the journalist. "It started," I said. "She knows." He didn't ask what I meant. "Send me everything. I'll have it backed up and secured by tonight." And then he added, "Margaret, be careful. If she's willing to do what I think she did to Martin, she's not going to let you walk away clean." I didn't sleep that night either. I sat at my kitchen table, the same spot I'd stitched together Nathan's Halloween costumes, the same table where I cried the first time he brought Alina over and called me dramatic for questioning her. And I realized something that pierced me to the bone: this wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't even just about Nathan. Alina was poison. And if I didn't stop her now, she'd ruin more lives. She'd bury the truth. And worst of all, she'd win. But not this time. Because witches don't hide. We hunt. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, I opened my front door to find the newspaper on my porch. But it wasn't mine. I hadn't subscribed to any paper in years, and yet there it lay, pristine and heavy, folded with surgical precision. I bent down to pick it up and instantly felt the shift. It was too thick. Tucked inside the pages was a manila envelope, flat but weighty, labeled with a single word in block letters: insurance. I carried it to my kitchen like I was holding an unexploded grenade. Inside were photos, dozens of them, printed in high-resolution color. Alina in various disguises, different hair, different clothes, different names. One image showed her entering a courthouse under the alias Samantha Vale. Another showed her holding hands with an older man, somewhere in Monaco, labeled Dante R. Wolf, alleged victim 2017. Another image, this one sharper, more recent, was of her at what looked like a bank, signing papers, the document header barely visible but legible: power of attorney. And below that, Nathan's name. My heart nearly stopped. She had power of attorney over my son. I slammed the envelope shut and backed away from the table like it might bite me. I had expected lies, even betrayal, but legal authority over Nathan's life? Over his medical care, finances, decisions? That was a whole new depth of control. I tried calling him, once, then again. Straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. What could I possibly say that wouldn't sound like the ravings of a paranoid mother? But then, like it always did, the fear turned to focus. She was spiraling. If she was rushing to seize control of Nathan's life so formally, so suddenly, it meant she was afraid. And fear makes people reckless. I needed proof Nathan hadn't signed that document willingly. Proof she was coercing him. And I knew exactly where to look. That night, I went to their house. Not as Margaret. As someone else entirely. I dressed in one of Alina's favorite influencer disguises, sleek black coat, oversized sunglasses, clipboard in hand. I knew their security code. Nathan had shared it with me a year ago when they were away and asked me to water the plants. She probably didn't even remember. As the front door clicked open, I felt the weight of the risk settle onto my spine, but I pushed through. The house was quiet. Immaculate. Too immaculate. Like a museum display of a perfect marriage. I moved quickly, straight to the office. That's where I found it, her drawer full of contracts, labeled meticulously. Power of attorney. Signed. Notarized. But when I turned the page, I gasped. Nathan's signature was off. Slightly different. Hesitant. And then, beneath it, a second page, an unsigned draft dated 2 weeks prior, with different terms, more protective clauses. That one bore Nathan's initials. The signed version had been altered. She had edited the draft and slipped it through. Forgery wasn't just likely, it was staring me in the face. But before I could photograph the pages, I heard a sound. Footsteps. I froze, my heart pounding so loud I swore it echoed through the floorboards. The footsteps moved past the room, slow and heavy. Then a creak, like someone sitting down. I peeked through the hallway. Nathan. Alone. Sitting on the couch, head in his hands, shoulders trembling. I watched him for a long moment, torn between stepping forward or slipping out quietly. But something in me knew, he wasn't the same man who watched me get humiliated without lifting a finger. That man had been sleepwalking. This man was breaking. I took a single photo of the altered document, then left the house without a sound. Back home, I sent the image to Elijah with a note, "She's forging legal control. We need a lawyer in this now." An hour later, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Meet me tomorrow. 2 p.m., abandoned post office on Lark Street. Bring the original documents." No name. Just coordinates. And suddenly, I realized something terrifying. Someone else had broken into that house before me. Someone who had already seen what I saw. Someone playing a different game entirely. And I didn't know if they were on my side. But I was going anyway. Because witches don't beg. We confront. The abandoned post office on Lark Street looked like something out of a dream you wake up sweating from, shuttered windows covered in grime, graffiti curling across broken brick, vines strangling the mailbox like they were reclaiming what the world forgot. I stood across the street for 10 minutes before crossing, my hand clutching the envelope with the forged power of attorney like it was a heart transplant. No cars passed. No footsteps echoed. Just the wind and the sick feeling that something irreversible was about to happen. When I finally stepped inside through the warped double doors, it was darker than I expected, light filtered through cracks in the boarded windows, casting strange shadows that danced like ghosts. Then I heard it, 3 knocks. Not on the wall. Not on the door. From beneath the counter, inside the old clerk booth, and then a slow figure emerged. A woman. Mid-30s, leather jacket, short dark hair, expression like carved stone. She said nothing at first, just pointed to a bench. I sat. She stayed standing. "I'm the one who sent the photos," she said. Her voice was low, like someone used to whispering in dangerous rooms. "I used to work with Alina. Not directly. But close enough. I was one of her cleanup girls. The ones she hired when things got messy, relationships, finances, false accusations. I was good at it. Until she decided to bury me too. I didn't ask her name. She didn't offer it. Instead, she lit a cigarette with fingers that barely trembled and said, "You think you've exposed her? You haven't even peeled the first layer. What you saw with Martin? That's just one file in her cabinet." She reached into her coat and pulled out a hard drive wrapped in a baby pink ribbon, mocking the sweetness Alina always wore like perfume. On here? Her real client list. Names, dates, payouts. Half of them wouldn't survive public scrutiny. And that's why she's going to come for you, Margaret. Not to silence you. But to break you publicly. Legally. Financially. Morally. I stared at the drive, the ribbon unraveling slowly. "Why give this to me?" I asked. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Because you're the only one stupid or brave enough to face her without a mask. And because I want to see her fall, too." She stepped forward and handed me the drive. "But understand this, once you open it, you don't get to be innocent anymore. You'll know things. Big things. And people will try to bury you with them." I took it. Of course I did. I didn't come this far to turn back at the final door. "One more thing," she added, stepping back into the shadows. "Don't trust the lawyer your journalist friend recommends. He's already been approached. Alina buys silence. With money or secrets. Everyone has a price." By the time I got home, it was raining, hard. The kind of storm that feels personal, like the sky is punishing you for knowing too much. I dried the drive with a towel and locked myself in the back room, the one where I used to hide Nathan's Christmas presents. Plugged it in. Held my breath. The folders were endless, color-coded, dated, titled by names I recognized from news headlines and charity boards. Alina hadn't just manipulated my son. She had weaponized image and silence like a master illusionist. Every secret she found, she stored. Every weakness, she used. The worst part? She'd filmed her strategies, videos of herself rehearsing manipulations, practicing cries, crafting statements for victims she would later discredit. One folder stopped me cold, Nathan Hargrove, contingency. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside were emails she'd written but never sent, press statements in case Margaret dies unexpectedly, insurance claims prepared in my name, even drafts of posts mourning my sudden decline in mental health. I felt the bile rise in my throat. She was planning to erase me from the narrative entirely, not just in life, but in memory. But even as my fear grew claws, so did my clarity. Alina wasn't unraveling. She was doubling down. She had anticipated this fight. She had files for everyone. And yet, she hadn't expected me to be this patient. To be this methodical. She didn't see me coming because she thought I'd break after the wedding reception. But I was only just beginning. I called Elijah and told him everything, the drive, the meeting, the warning about the compromised lawyer. We need someone else, I said. Someone who hasn't played in her circles. He paused. Then replied, I know one. She's been waiting to take Alina down for years. And she owes me a favor. That night, I lit a single candle in the kitchen and stared into the flame. Not because I was trying to be dramatic. But because I needed to see what burned and what didn't. Fear? Burned. Doubt? Burned. Love for Nathan? Untouched. Because deep down, I believed he could still be saved. But only if I tore down every wall Alina had built between us. And that meant risking everything, my safety, my home, even my freedom. Because witches don't whisper. We roar. 3 days passed and I didn't hear from Nathan, not a text, not a missed call, not even one of those cold, emotionless voice messages he'd fallen into the habit of leaving since Alina took over his life. I knew better than to expect a knock on the door. I also knew better than to expect silence. Because silence was never silence with Alina, it was orchestration. And I was right. On the 4th morning, I opened my front door to find a summons pinned to it with a pearl-handled knife. A legal notice. Defamation. Emotional distress. Damages in the sum of $2 million. The signature at the bottom didn't surprise me, Alina v. Hargrove. I read it twice, my hand steady as stone. This was the game she'd been waiting to play. Paint me as a bitter, mentally unwell old woman who'd lost touch with reality and lashed out in jealous rage. I wasn't shocked. I was disappointed. She could do better than clichés. But I also knew this was just the first page in a longer script she'd written for my downfall. I brought the papers inside, scanned them, sent them straight to Elijah. She's trying to silence me in court, I wrote. Which means I'm getting close to something she doesn't want anyone to see. He replied instantly, already connected with the new lawyer. Her name is Danielle Voss. Former federal prosecutor. Her sister was one of Alina's victims. She'll meet you tomorrow at noon. I spent the rest of the day assembling everything, every printed screenshot, photo, audio clip, even the manila envelope labeled insurance. It all went into a plain black binder that I stared at for hours like it was a loaded weapon. Because that's what it was. A binder of truth. A binder sharp enough to shred every mask Alina had ever worn. That night, I sat at the kitchen table staring at Nathan's old baby monitor. I'd kept it in a drawer for decades. He used to cry if he couldn't hear my voice through it. Now, years later, he wouldn't even return my calls. And still, I couldn't stop loving him. Couldn't stop hoping the boy I raised still existed underneath the man he had become. Alina might own his name on paper, but she didn't own his soul. Not yet. The next morning, I arrived at the legal office 20 minutes early. Danielle was already there, a thin, elegant woman with tired eyes and a voice like cut glass. She didn't waste time. "I'm in," she said after flipping through 3 pages of the binder. "But if we go forward, she'll come for you harder. She'll leak stories. Plant articles. Try to get Nathan to file a restraining order." I nodded. "Let her," I said. "I've already been humiliated. She's just polishing what's left." Danielle leaned forward, her voice dropping. "The key isn't proving she's a liar. It's proving intent. That she orchestrated harm. That she forged signatures. That she used deception to seize control of your son's assets and isolate you. She tapped the forged power of attorney. This alone is enough to trigger a preliminary hearing. But if we want to bury her, we'll need Nathan." That's when I felt my heart sink. "He won't help me," I whispered. "He's too far gone." Danielle stared at me a long moment. "Then we don't ask him to help. We show him the truth, whether he wants to see it or not." That afternoon, I made a decision I had been putting off for too long. I returned to Nathan's house. This time, I rang the bell. No disguises. No sneaking. Alina opened the door herself, still in silk pajamas, flawless as always, her expression curdled into a tight, fake smile the moment she saw me. "Wow," she said sweetly. "You're braver than I thought." I smiled back. "And you're more fragile than I imagined." She leaned against the doorframe. "You've lost. Your lies won't stand in court." I didn't flinch. "I'm not here for you," I said. "I'm here for my son." And I called his name, loudly, firmly. "Nathan." He appeared a moment later, hesitating at the top of the stairs. His face was pale, thinner than I remembered. "Mom," he said, voice brittle. "What are you doing here?" I stepped forward, past Alina, who tried to block me, but Nathan raised a hand, hesitant, confused. "Just hear me," I said, locking eyes with him. 5 minutes. That's all I ask." And before he could answer, I handed him the binder. "Page 32. That's your signature. Now turn to page 35. That's the original draft you signed. Notice the difference?" He stared at the pages, flipping slowly, brows furrowed. Then Alina lunged forward. "This is harassment. She's manipulating you." But Nathan raised his hand again. "Alina," he said softly, "let me read." She turned to him, stunned. Not used to the word no coming from his lips. And in that moment, for the first time in years, I saw it, the crack in her armor. She didn't expect him to doubt. She didn't plan for him to read. She didn't count on the truth holding its own weight. I didn't wait for the outcome. I walked out, back down the steps, binder now empty in my hands, heart pounding in my chest like a war drum. Because something had shifted. The trap she set for me had become a mirror. And it was starting to show her reflection. Because witches don't retreat. We reclaim. I didn't expect a call. Not from Nathan. Not so soon. And certainly not with the quiet, broken voice that greeted me just after midnight. "Mom, why would she need a power of attorney over me?" I sat up in bed, heart racing. "Why does anyone need control over someone they say they love?" I said softly. He didn't speak for a while, just the sound of him breathing, hesitant, uneven. "She said it was for emergencies," he murmured. "That it was standard in marriage." I didn't think, his voice cracked. I didn't think she'd lie. I could hear it, something crumbling in his chest. Not hatred. Not yet. But doubt. Real doubt. The kind that doesn't vanish after a night's sleep. "I want to meet with your lawyer," he said suddenly. "Danielle. I want to see everything." And just like that, the silence between us, the wall Alina had bricked over brick with sweet poison, began to crack. I didn't cry. Not then. I just nodded into the darkness and whispered, "I'll set it up." But after I hung up, I stayed up all night, hands trembling, staring at the ceiling as a strange mix of joy and terror flooded me. Because if Nathan was waking up, truly waking up, then Alina would feel it. And a woman like her, whose power is built on blind trust, only knows how to respond one way, violently. The next morning, Danielle and I sat in her office, binder between us, computer open, strategy mapped. "We have two options," she said calmly. "We go to court and fight this publicly, which could drag on for months. Or we go nuclear, media, press, social exposure. Force a collapse from the outside in." Personally? She looked at me with cool intensity. "I think Alina's more afraid of losing her image than any court ruling." I agreed. But the truth was, I didn't want a tabloid war. Not unless I had to. I didn't want Nathan to be collateral damage in a scandal. I wanted him to see with his own eyes who he had married. And maybe, just maybe, I wanted to give him a chance to confront her himself. Danielle leaned back and folded her arms. "Whatever you decide, just know she's planning something. You're not the only one gathering evidence." She slid a folder across the desk. "She hired a private investigator. He's been asking around about your finances, your medical history, even your mental health." I opened the folder and there it was, photos of me at the grocery store, in my garden, one from 2 weeks ago when I visited the cemetery. I felt my stomach twist. "She's building a narrative," Danielle said. "One where you're unstable, delusional, possibly dangerous. If she can discredit you, she can discredit everything." I walked home in a fog, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was fire. Let her take pictures. Let her build her story. Because I had mine too. And mine had truth. That night, I got another message, from 7. A short video clip. No words. No explanation. Just Alina, in a makeup chair, talking to someone off camera. "I'm telling you, once the property transfer is finalized, I'll be done with him. He'll be devastated, but rich widows love a man with a sob story. I'm not going to waste my 30s wiping baby food off a counter." My breath caught. Done with him. Once the property transfer is finalized. It wasn't just a toxic marriage. It was premeditated. Strategic. Every kiss, every tear, every smile, an investment with an exit strategy. I forwarded the clip to Danielle, then sat in silence until the phone rang again. This time, it was Nathan. But he wasn't calm. He wasn't quiet. He was shaking. "She just told me she's pregnant," he said. "But she won't let me see the test. Won't let me come to the doctor. And when I said I wanted to talk to you again, she locked herself in the bathroom and said she'd kill herself if I left." My hand covered my mouth. Not because I was surprised, but because I knew this pattern. Isolation. Manipulation. Threats of self-harm. It was the last card in the abuser's deck, and Alina had just played it. "Nathan," I said gently, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. This isn't about love. This is about control. And if you don't take it back now, she'll destroy you piece by piece." His breathing was ragged. "I know. I know. I don't know how to leave." And that's when I realized what my next step had to be. I wasn't going to court. Not yet. I was going back to the place where everything began. The wedding reception hall. The very room where she publicly mocked me and taught Nathan to look the other way. There was going to be a reunion. But this time, it would be my script. Because witches don't beg for freedom. We reclaim our throne. I wore the same dress. The same navy blue gown Alina mocked at the wedding reception, the one she called funeral fabric, the one that hung on my body like mourning. I wore it again not for symbolism, but for war. I walked into the same ballroom where she'd called me an old witch, in front of chandeliers and waiters and polished guests who had politely laughed as if cruelty was something served with dessert. It was midweek now, quiet, just as I'd planned. I had rented the space for an intimate family gathering. The owner was confused but didn't ask questions. Money does that. I set up 3 chairs in a circle beneath the same floral arch they had kissed under. One for me. One for Nathan. One for Alina. I placed a single folder on the table beside them, labeled for Nathan's eyes only. Inside were printouts, photos of Alina's secret bank accounts, her fake pregnancy documentation, her draft email about divorcing him after the property transfer. And at the very back, I included a letter. My last one. If things went badly, if Nathan chose blindness, if Alina turned him so far inside out he couldn't breathe without her permission, I would walk away. Forever. I was done playing mother to a man who would hand me over for slaughter with a glass of champagne. At precisely 4 p.m., the ballroom doors opened. Nathan walked in first. Alone. His tie undone, his face hollowed by weeks of confusion and grief and quiet unraveling. He looked at the arch, then at me, and his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, not quite an apology. "Where is she?" he asked softly. "She'll be here," I said. "She thinks this is a reconciliation." Nathan frowned. "What is it really?" I met his eyes and answered the only way I could. "It's a funeral. For the version of you she created." He didn't respond. Just walked to his chair and sat down like a man on trial. Alina entered exactly 5 minutes late, as always. Draped in white silk, the picture of elegance and deception, her lips curved in that same slow smirk she'd worn when she called me a witch. "Margaret," she said sweetly, "I was shocked when I saw the invitation. How bold of you to rent out our special place." I nodded. "I wanted to give you a stage, dear. One final performance." She cocked her head, glanced at Nathan, and her expression flickered, just a flash, when she saw he wasn't looking at her. Not with warmth. Not with awe. But with something else. Suspicion. Caution. She sat anyway. I didn't speak first. I reached into my bag, pulled out a small remote, and clicked the projector screen behind them. It lit up. Silent footage played, clips from her cloud drive, stitched together. Alina mocking Nathan's emotional fragility. Practicing the insult for my reception humiliation. Flirting with Martin Castillo in the hotel lobby. Smiling into her phone as she said, "Once the deed's in my name, I'll stage the miscarriage and cash out." Alina stood suddenly. "This is illegal," she hissed. "You have no right," but Nathan raised his hand without looking at her. "Sit down." His voice didn't shake. She froze. I turned off the video and pushed the folder toward him. "Everything you need is in there. I won't explain it. You have to read it yourself. And then, you choose." Nathan stared at the folder like it was radioactive. "Choose what?" I stood. Smoothed the wrinkles from my dress. "Whether you want to keep the illusion. Or face the cost of truth." Alina started pacing, her voice rising. "This is manipulation. She's trying to poison you against me. I'm your wife, Nathan. We're having a baby, are we?" he interrupted quietly. "Because I spoke to your doctor's office. They've never heard of you." Alina turned pale. "You, what?" His voice cracked then, just slightly. "I loved you. God help me, I did. But I don't even know who you are anymore." And then she snapped. Like glass under pressure. She grabbed the folder and flung it across the room, papers scattering like broken wings. "You think you're so clever," she spat at me. "You think this makes you noble? You're pathetic." He was mine the moment I said hello. "You lost him years ago and just couldn't admit it. You're nothing but a bitter old woman who couldn't handle being replaced." I didn't blink. I let the words hit me like wind, then settle around my feet like dust. "You're right," I said softly. "You replaced me. But not as a mother. As a manipulator. And now that mask has cracked. Nathan stood, slowly, shoulders shaking. He looked at Alina, then me. Then walked to the center of the arch and picked up one sheet that had landed on the floor, a photo of her hugging Martin, date stamped 3 weeks before the wedding. He didn't speak. He didn't cry. He simply folded the photo in half and walked toward the door. "Where are you going?" Alina demanded. "Nathan? Don't walk away from me." He turned only once. "You already walked away from the truth. I'm just following it." And then he left. Left her standing there. Left me standing there. And I knew nothing would ever be the same again. Because witches don't chase love. We let it return when it remembers who we are. Alina didn't crumble. Not then. Not in front of me. She stood in the middle of that grand ballroom, alone now, save for the scraps of paper fluttering at her feet like discarded confetti, and forced a smile back onto her face as if she still had an audience worth charming. "He'll be back," she said, brushing invisible lint from her sleeve. "They always come back. Men like Nathan. They don't survive without women like me." I didn't argue. I didn't offer comfort. I simply walked past her toward the door, heels tapping across marble like a funeral march for her delusion. But I paused at the threshold, turned to her one last time, and said the words I knew would haunt her more than any courtroom. "This time, he's seen you. Really seen you. And you can't unring a bell, Alina. You can't seduce blindness." Then I walked out, leaving her in the very spotlight she'd fought so hard to own, now flickering, dim, and about to burn out. By the time I got home, my phone was already buzzing. Elijah had called twice. Danielle had left a voice message saying, "Prepare yourself. She's retaliating." And then I saw it, an alert from a gossip news site titled "Margaret Hargrove, Obsessive Mother or Malicious Manipulator?" The article was long, venomous, and clearly planted. It painted me as unstable, bitter, obsessed with controlling my adult son's marriage. It mentioned fabricated emails, stolen footage, and even referenced the fact that I had previously worked in surveillance, spinning it into a sinister accusation. They even quoted a family insider, claiming I had once threatened to harm myself to gain Nathan's attention. I felt the heat rush to my face, not from shame, but from fury. She had expected this moment. She had been preparing the PR counterattack from the beginning. She knew the mask would eventually slip, and like every con artist, she had already prepped the story where she was the victim. And worst of all, some people would believe it. Not because it was true, but because it was easier. Easier to imagine an old woman losing her mind than a young bride crafting a decade-long con. But what she hadn't counted on was this: I wasn't alone anymore. Nathan called that same night. His voice was quieter, steadier. "I saw the article," he said. "I know she fed it to them." Her tone, her words. I recognize them now. I stayed quiet, letting him work through it himself. "I believed her for so long," he whispered. "When she'd lie, I'd blame myself for being suspicious. When she'd cry, I'd think I caused it. When she'd twist your words, I'd let her." His voice cracked then. "Mom. I'm sorry." I closed my eyes and let the words settle. They didn't undo what had happened. But they built a bridge. A fragile, trembling bridge, but one I was willing to cross. "It's not your fault," I said. "She used love like a weapon. But you're seeing her now. That's all that matters." Then I asked, gently, "Are you safe?" He answered, "Not yet. But I'm trying." The next morning, Danielle called with news. "We've filed the paperwork to contest the power of attorney. Once Nathan gives his statement, we'll have enough to pursue fraud charges. But there's something else." I braced myself. "Alina's accounts have started quietly moving money offshore. She's liquidating. Fast. That tells me she's preparing to run." I felt a chill wrap around my spine. What does she have left to protect? Danielle didn't pause. "A lot. She's still a public figure. She still has silent investors. And if she runs, she'll take more than just money. She'll rewrite the story, disappear, and play victim from some tropical villa with a new alias. I knew what I had to do. I went to the press. Not the gossip rags. Not influencers. Real journalists. Elijah helped arrange it, an exclusive interview with a veteran reporter known for exposing white-collar fraud and manipulative public figures. I told everything. I showed the documents, the recordings, the video clips. I even handed over the flash drive from the woman at the post office, after encrypting a copy for safety. And then, with trembling hands, I handed over my personal letter. One I had written for Nathan years ago but never sent. A letter that began, "If one day you forget who I am, I hope the world remembers me honestly." The interview would air in 3 days. And in those 3 days, I knew Alina would come for me. Harder than ever. Because her kingdom was made of glass. And I had finally picked up a stone. Because witches don't just survive. We strike. The morning the interview aired, the sky was gray, unmoving, unbroken, like the world itself was holding its breath. I didn't watch it live. I couldn't. Not because I was afraid of what I'd said, but because once you set fire to the house, watching it burn feels like vanity. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table, the same one that had weathered decades of heartbreak and hope, and I folded the napkin on my lap over and over until it was nothing but creases. Then the calls started. First Elijah. Then Danielle. Then 3 reporters I'd never spoken to. And the headlines began to roll in. Influencer bride exposed, the hidden empire of Alina v. Hargrove. Former federal prosecutor uncovers layered fraud tied to public figure. A mother's silence turned into a roar, the Margaret Hargrove files. The footage of Alina laughing about her fake pregnancy. The document showing Nathan's forged signature. The recordings of her coaching staff on how to discredit victims. It was all there. And it was undeniable. The public, once enchanted by her lifestyle posts and wedding elegance, turned hard. Comment sections that once praised her as iconic and visionary now called her calculated, soulless, and dangerous. The illusion cracked. And then it shattered. By noon, Alina's management team released a statement distancing themselves. By 3 p.m., 3 brands pulled out of paid partnerships. And by nightfall, she had locked every social media profile, deactivated her business pages, and gone radio silent. But it wasn't silence that brought relief. It was Nathan. He came to my door just before sunset, wearing an old hoodie I hadn't seen in years, his college one, with frayed sleeves and mustard stains from late-night meals. He looked human. Not groomed. Not perfect. Just painfully, deeply real. "She's gone," he said, eyes rimmed red. Took her things and vanished. Left a note saying she'd let me go before I embarrassed us both further. He tried to laugh but failed. "She never loved me, did she?" I stepped aside, letting him in, and said the only truth that mattered: she loved control. And you gave her something to control. He sank into the couch, hands over his face, breathing like the weight of 3 years had finally slid off his chest. "I thought I was the one protecting her," he whispered. "But she was the one poisoning me the whole time." We didn't talk for long. Some wounds speak best in silence. But as he sat there, I went to the kitchen and pulled out the glass box with the slice of their wedding cake, still frozen, still untouched. I placed it gently in front of him. He looked at it, then at me. "Why'd you keep this?" I sat beside him, voice steady. "Because I wanted to remember exactly how sweet things can look before they rot." He nodded slowly, then picked it up and walked it straight to the trash can. When it hit the bottom, something final settled in the air between us. A closing. A burial. Not of a marriage, but of an illusion. But I knew it wasn't over. Not yet. That evening, Danielle called with a chilling update. Interpol flagged an outbound account in Monaco this morning, linked to one of Alina's known aliases. She's attempting to move funds again, bigger this time. 7 figures. She's trying to disappear for good. My chest tightened. Do we have enough to issue an international warrant? I asked. Danielle's voice turned grim. Not yet. But if we catch her once more, just once, trying to defraud, bribe, or threaten, we'll have her. I hung up and stood in the middle of my living room, the memories of the last few months crashing into each other like waves in a storm. The woman who humiliated me in front of hundreds was now running. Not because I screamed, but because I stayed. And then the doorbell rang. I opened it cautiously. No one was there. Just a package on the porch. Inside, a note in Alina's unmistakable handwriting. You think you've won. But women like me never fall for long. And beneath the note? A single lipstick tube. Red. The same one she used to kiss my mirror. A warning. Or a promise. But what she still didn't understand was this: witches don't play by her rules. We write our own. I didn't show the lipstick to Nathan. Not because I wanted to protect him, those days were gone, but because I needed to move in silence now. Alina had left her final calling card not as surrender, but as provocation. A dare. A challenge. She wanted me to chase her. To rage, to shout, to throw fire until I burned myself. But what she didn't know, what she had never taken time to understand, is that I didn't move with heat. I moved with cold. Precision. Patience. And now that the public had turned, now that her fake world had imploded, I was going to push her the rest of the way over the edge. Because while she was out there running, draining bank accounts, switching wigs and passports, there was still one thing she needed more than her image, more than Nathan, more than her next con. She needed her money. And money leaves fingerprints. Danielle and I worked through the night, tracing the shell companies listed on the hard drive, the ones registered in Panama, Cyprus, and the British Virgin Islands. All of them tied to dormant nonprofits or vanity projects Alina had created under pseudonyms. One stood out: Halcyon Heart Foundation. A name soft enough to sound noble. But underneath, it had been moving laundered money in small, time transactions over the last 3 years, always stopping before detection thresholds. But 3 days ago, it had paused. Frozen. And that meant something was wrong. She was scared. She was stuck. And scared people make mistakes. So I gave her one. I called an old friend, Ruth, a retired banker who owed me a favor from decades ago when I helped her get out of a silent partnership with an abusive husband. She still had her credentials. Still had access to back-channel whisper networks in the financial world. I told her exactly what to say and where to say it. A forgotten asset tied to Halcyon Heart just matured, 2.4 million in a European hedge. The contact on file is still Alina Wexler, and the clock is ticking. It was bait. Beautiful, believable bait. All it had to do was reach the right ears. And it did. Less than 48 hours later, a login attempt pinged on the account, masked, but not perfectly. It originated in Prague, from a luxury hotel known for hosting quiet guests. Danielle had it flagged, traced, and documented in less than a day. Alina had taken the bait. She tried to move the money, and that, finally, was enough. Danielle sent the report to Interpol and the fraud division. "We have her," she said. "International warrant approved. It's just a matter of time now." I nodded, but I didn't smile. Because something inside me still wasn't quiet. Not fear. Not doubt. Something else. Something unfinished. That evening, Nathan came over with an envelope. He sat at my kitchen table like he used to when he needed help with a hard decision. "She sent this to my work," he said. "Said it was my fault. That I ruined her. That she lost everything because I was weak." He handed me the letter. The handwriting was rushed, angry, more venom than ink. She accused him of betrayal, of falling for a broken woman's lies, of being nothing without her. I read it slowly, then looked up. "How does it make you feel?" I asked. Nathan's face was tired, but no longer fragile. "Free," he said. "Because for the first time, I see her clearly. And she's not the woman I married. She's the monster I let in the house." We sat in silence for a long time. Then I told him about Prague. About the trap. About the warrant. He didn't cheer. He didn't gloat. He simply nodded and said, "Do you think she'll come back?" I thought about the lipstick. The note. The way she refused to be erased. "She'll try," I said. "But next time, she won't come as a bride or a brand. She'll come to destroy quietly. To finish what she started." Nathan took a deep breath. "Then we finish it first." And that's when I knew. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It never had been. Because the truth doesn't just liberate the wounded. It arms them. And witches don't run from war. We light the final torch. She came back on a Wednesday. Not in a blaze, not in a disguise, not even in the middle of the night like some crawling shadow, but in daylight, wearing a navy trench coat and sunglasses too large for her sharp, skeletal face. The doorman at Nathan's apartment recognized her and buzzed her in, unaware of the international warrant flagged quietly beneath her name. She walked up to his door, calm, purposeful, rang the bell twice, and when he opened it, she smiled like a ghost that hadn't realized it had died. "I'm here for closure," she said. Nathan froze. Not because he believed her. Not because he was scared. But because in that moment, seeing her standing there, pretending like it was all some misunderstanding, some romantic tragedy, he realized how deeply empty she truly was. He let her in. Not because he forgave her, but because the plan had already been set. The apartment had been wired. Danielle had informed the authorities. Elijah's team was recording. I waited across the street, watching from the passenger seat of a parked sedan with tinted windows and a voice recorder in my hand, heart hammering like war drums. This was the final act. The moment the mask would slip, not because we ripped it off, but because Alina would finally forget she ever wore one. Inside, Nathan offered her tea. She declined. She didn't sit. Instead, she stood by the window, peering out as if expecting to see herself reflected across the glass in headlines and admiration. "You're making a mistake," she said. "Letting her twist you. She's always wanted to control you. Your mother never knew how to let go." Nathan kept his tone neutral. "And you did?" That was the hook. She turned to face him, arms crossed. "Everything I did was to build us a future. You think Margaret ever cared about that? She wants you to live in guilt, in her shadow. But me?" She stepped closer. "I made you strong." "By forging my signature?" he asked, voice brittle. "By lying about a pregnancy?" She blinked. A pause. Then smiled again. "That's marriage, Nathan. Everyone fakes something." And then she added, with that vicious glint returning to her eyes, "And let's be honest, you always liked it when someone else took care of the hard parts." That was the moment the door opened. 2 plainclothes officers stepped inside, badges raised, voices calm. "Alina Vexler-Hargrove, you are under arrest for fraud, identity falsification, and financial conspiracy across international lines." She didn't scream. Didn't cry. Didn't even flinch. She turned to Nathan, lips curling like a snake's final strike. "You'll regret this. She will turn you against yourself. Just like she turned your father before he died." Nathan didn't speak. He didn't move. But I did. I stepped inside just as the handcuffs clicked, and our eyes met one last time. Hers full of venom. Mine full of something far colder. Not revenge. Not triumph. Stillness. And I whispered only 4 words. "You lost your own war." They led her out the door, down the hall, and into the world she once controlled. Her hair perfect. Her lipstick smudged. Her wrists in steel. The headlines exploded within the hour. Alina Vexler-Hargrove arrested in fraud case after mother-in-law's bombshell files. Influencer exposed as international grifter, source of evidence. The old witch herself. The irony wasn't lost on me. The nickname she used to shame me had now become my signature. The world didn't laugh at me anymore. They listened. They wept. And they asked how many others like her still walked among us, wearing perfection like armor and wielding manipulation like gospel. I didn't give interviews. I didn't post online. I simply watched it all unfold in silence, my silence, this time, on my own terms. That night, Nathan stood in my kitchen again, watching the kettle boil. I didn't know who I was until I lost her, he said. And now I feel like I'm looking in a mirror for the first time. I nodded. That's what they do. They steal your reflection. One day at a time. He asked me, how did you survive her? I poured the tea. Because before she ever met you, she tried to bury me alive in front of everyone I loved. And instead of dying, I bloomed in the dark. Because witches don't just rise. We remember. The morning after Alina's arrest, I walked through town like a woman returning from war, quiet, invisible again, but this time by choice. The bakery I used to visit looked the same, the smell of cinnamon rolls curling from the door like old memories, and yet everything inside me had changed. People on the sidewalk glanced my way, some with recognition, others with unsure respect, like they were trying to piece together the woman who once stood silent at a wedding and the woman who now stood behind headlines. But I didn't want their pity, and I certainly didn't want their praise. I wanted peace. Not the kind you find in applause or apologies, but the kind that wraps around your bones when the worst is finally behind you, and all that's left is the echo of your own strength. I bought a loaf of bread, paid in cash, and left without speaking to anyone. The air was crisp, but not cold. The kind of morning that feels like the start of something honest. Back home, I stood in the garden and stared at the soil I hadn't touched in weeks. The weeds had crept in. The lavender was brittle. The rosemary stalks bent like old women. I knelt anyway, digging my hands into the dirt, letting the earth remember me. Because before I was a mother, before I was a wife, before I became the center of a scandal, this was who I was. A woman who knew how to grow things in silence. Nathan arrived that afternoon, looking older, softer. He brought wine. We sat in the backyard under the fading sun, and for the first time since he was a teenager, he asked me about my past, not as a mother, but as a woman. What were you like before me? He asked. I laughed, quiet and surprised. A lot like you, I said. Hopeful. Hungry for meaning. Foolish enough to believe love would be enough to make someone good. He sipped slowly. I wish I'd known you better. I touched his hand. You still can. That evening, we received word, Alina had made her first statement to her lawyer. Not to the press. Not to the world. To the court. She denied everything. Of course she did. Claimed she was being targeted by a bitter family and jealous associates. That the footage was doctored. That the recordings were manipulated. That the pregnancy was real and that she lost it because of stress from relentless harassment. It didn't shake me. Because I had seen her cornered. And when a woman like Alina is cornered, she builds myths. Not because they're true, but because they feel better than shame. But what she didn't understand was that the story no longer belonged to her. The public had watched her unravel in real time. The courts would follow the evidence. And Nathan? He was no longer a man waiting for permission to see. Before he left that night, he stood at the door and turned to me. Do you hate her? He asked. I thought about it, really thought about it. No, I said. I don't hate her. Because hate means she still has a piece of me. And I took all of it back. He nodded, then said something I wasn't prepared for. I want to testify against her. I want to tell the court what I saw, what she did, what she said when no one else was listening. I felt something swell in my chest, not pride, not relief. Something deeper. A recognition that my son, the one she tried to erase, was coming back to life. That night, I sat alone in my living room and opened the letter I had written months ago. The one I had sealed and labeled "If I disappear." It detailed every file, every account, every betrayal, every plan. I read it from start to finish, then without hesitation, tore it in half. Then into quarters. Then into ashes. Because I no longer needed it. The war was not just being won. It was being buried. And witches don't carry old fire. We plant what grows after. The courthouse smelled like paper and cold coffee, that strange mixture of bureaucracy and broken promises. Nathan sat beside me on the bench outside the courtroom, suit jacket too stiff on his shoulders, fingers drumming silently against his knee. He hadn't said much all morning, but he didn't need to. I knew the war inside him, the battle between shame and courage, the ache of stepping into a room where your pain becomes evidence. "You don't have to do this," I whispered. He looked up at me, eyes clear but distant. "Yes, I do," he said. "Because if I don't say it now, I'll carry it forever." And then he stood, walked toward the door, and disappeared inside, leaving me alone in the hallway with nothing but the echo of my own heartbeat and the distant voices of lawyers rehearsing battles they'd already rehearsed 100 times. I didn't testify that day. Danielle said my voice had already spoken loud enough. The recordings, the documents, the hard drive, all of it had already been submitted. But Nathan's testimony mattered in a way mine never could. Because it came from the man Alina had pretended to love. It came from the center of her illusion. And when he took the stand and described how she'd rewritten his life one subtle cruelty at a time, isolating him from friends, weaponizing affection, planting fear, something shifted in the courtroom. Not just the jury. Not just the press seated in the back. Even the judge leaned forward, pen frozen over paper, as Nathan spoke with that broken, steady voice. "She convinced me my mother was dangerous. That her love was control. That every time she questioned something, it was manipulation. But the truth is, I was the one being manipulated. And I let her destroy the people who loved me because I thought silence made me strong." Danielle told me later there were jurors wiping tears by the end of it. That even Alina, composed, polished, still clinging to her fragile poise, flinched when Nathan mentioned the fake pregnancy. The photo of the falsified medical forms. The footage of her practicing her grieving wife look in the mirror. But it wasn't just the lies that damned her. It was the pattern. The trail of silence she left behind in the lives of other men, other families, other names she used like masks. And suddenly, her myth collapsed, not in flames, but in something much harder to erase, public truth. When Nathan stepped off the stand, he walked past her. She looked up at him, just once. A flicker of her old charm, one last test. "Nathan," she whispered. But he didn't stop. He didn't look. And that was when she realized, her power was gone. Not because of the court. Not because of the press. But because the person she needed most to believe her, finally didn't. After the hearing, we walked out into the sunlight. Cameras snapped. Questions flew. We didn't answer. Nathan slipped off his tie like it was a noose and tossed it into the nearest bin. "I feel free," he said. Lighter. Like I finally stepped out of something I didn't even know I was buried in. I nodded, not with pride, but with understanding. Because freedom isn't always a cheer. Sometimes, it's just the first deep breath you take when no one's watching. Later that night, he came over for dinner. We didn't talk about the trial. We just sat in the living room, sharing memories that used to feel too far away. "Remember when I broke my arm climbing that neighbor's tree?" he asked. "You carried me 6 blocks to the hospital like you were made of steel." I smiled. I was. Until someone taught me how to bleed. Before he left, he handed me something. A photo. One I hadn't seen in years. The two of us, taken the day he graduated college. My arm around him, both of us laughing. I kept it hidden, he said. Because she hated it. Said it made me look too small. I traced the edges of the picture with my fingers. Then maybe small is where the real things live. Because witches don't measure power in noise. We measure it in what we choose to carry, and what we finally put down. The verdict hadn't even been read yet when the calls started coming, not from lawyers, but from reporters, documentarians, women's groups, even producers pitching stories with words like brave and gripping. Suddenly I wasn't just the old woman humiliated at a wedding, I was the centerpiece of a narrative they wanted to package, polish, and parade. But I didn't answer any of them. Not yet. Because this wasn't a moment for exploitation, it was a moment for reclamation. And before I let the world turn my pain into entertainment, I needed to speak my truth on my terms. So I agreed to one interview. Not with a morning show. Not with a glossy magazine. But with a small community radio program run by women who specialized in stories that never made it past the gatekeepers. They didn't want a soundbite. They wanted the whole wound. And I gave it to them. I sat in a quiet studio, headphones over my ears, the microphone blinking red, and spoke slowly, clearly, without rehearsing. This didn't begin the night she called me an old witch in front of a wedding crowd. It began the day I let someone treat my silence as consent. And it continued every time I swallowed pain for the sake of keeping peace. I told them about the wedding, the lipstick on the mirror, the fake charity fronts, the cold rehearsals of cruelty disguised as charm. I told them about the envelope Nathan handed me, the moment he looked at me not as a mother to obey or a nuisance to endure, but as a human being trying to save him. Sometimes, I said, it takes being publicly broken for someone to remember how solid you were before they forgot you. The host was quiet afterward, then simply said, to every mother listening who has been silenced by power in high heels and pearls, this story is yours too. And it was. Because after that interview aired, I didn't just receive letters. I received confessions. Messages from women, older, younger, foreign, local, who told me about daughters-in-law who used kindness as a lure and control as a cage. About sons who disappeared into marriages where their love was repurposed into tools for leverage. About wounds that hadn't been given language until now. And with every letter I read, I realized this story had never just been mine. It had always been a mirror. The next day, the verdict was delivered. Guilty. On 5 counts of fraud, conspiracy, and identity falsification. Sentence pending. Possible extradition request still incoming. Danielle called and said, she'll never live this down. Not in your country. Not in any country. Even if she runs again, she'll always be looking over her shoulder now. You took away the one thing she couldn't live without, belief. I didn't celebrate. I didn't toast. I went to the reception hall instead. The very place where the wound began. The manager let me in, now fully aware of who I was. Take your time, he said softly. The hall was empty. Echoing. Clean. But I walked to the exact spot where I stood that night, beneath the chandelier, beside the floral arch now long dismantled. I closed my eyes and whispered, you called me an old witch in front of everyone I loved. But you forgot what witches really are. We don't vanish when you mock us. We rise in the silence you leave behind. I stood there a long time. Not as a mother. Not as a victim. But as a woman who had dragged truth into the light, and dared it to stay. Because witches don't just survive betrayal. We turn it into prophecy. The day before the final sentencing felt like walking through fog, thick, cold, and full of whispers I couldn't quite catch. Nathan and I sat side by side in the courtroom, our hands barely touching, each of us wrapped in our own thoughts. Alina entered last, escorted by guards, her once impenetrable mask cracked and pale. The room was heavy with anticipation, but what caught me most was how little she looked like the woman who had ruled my life for years, no longer the gleaming bride or ruthless con artist, just a hollow figure fighting a losing battle. When the judge read out the charges and the evidence, every detail felt like a knife carving away the lies she built around herself. I saw Nathan's eyes flicker, hardening with resolve, no longer the lost son but a man reclaiming his story. After the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, Alina's face crumpled briefly, then hardened into defiance. She glared at me once, a look that said she'd never forgive. But I was already free. Not because of the sentence, but because I had survived her hate, her betrayal, her empire of shadows. Later, as Nathan and I walked out of the courthouse, sunlight filtering through the pillars, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. "What now?" he asked softly. I smiled, the first real smile in months. "Now, we rebuild. From truth. From trust. From the ashes she left behind." And in that moment, I understood that the real victory wasn't justice delivered in a courtroom. It was the quiet reclaiming of our lives, scarred but unbroken. Because witches don't just endure darkness. We turn it into dawn. The morning after the verdict was like waking from a long nightmare, but still feeling the shadow of fear lingering at the edges of my mind. The sun streamed softly through the kitchen window, but I didn't feel its warmth until Nathan's hand found mine across the breakfast table. For so long, the silence between us had been filled with unspoken pain and fractured memories, but now, in this quiet moment, it felt like a bridge, fragile but real. We didn't speak much that morning. Words felt inadequate to carry the weight of everything that had passed between us. Instead, we sat, letting the steady rhythm of shared coffee cups and the distant hum of a waking city fill the space. The battle was over, but the healing had just begun. The truth had been our weapon and our salvation. Alina's carefully crafted illusions, her lies whispered behind closed doors and polished smiles, were laid bare for all to see. The headlines no longer echoed with ridicule directed at me but told stories of resilience, of justice, and the quiet power of a mother who refused to be erased. And yet, I knew this was not just my story. It was a testament to every woman silenced by betrayal, every person diminished by cruelty masked as love. I thought about the letters I'd received, the stories shared in whispered tones and typed confessions. The women who found strength in my voice and, in turn, lent theirs to the chorus demanding truth. This wasn't a victory for me alone. It was a dawn for many. Nathan and I walked together through the small park near my home that afternoon. The trees were budding with fresh leaves, the earth fragrant with spring's promise. We spoke of simple things, books, movies, the old garden that desperately needed tending. And for the first time in years, there was laughter between us, light and spontaneous, as if reclaiming lost time. But beneath the surface of this fragile peace lay a deeper commitment. A promise to rebuild not only our fractured family but to protect the truth we had fought so fiercely for. That evening, I sat before my computer and composed a message, not a declaration of victory, but an invitation. An invitation for others to stand up, to speak out, to believe in their own power even when the world tries to silence them. I asked viewers to like, share, and subscribe to the channel where these stories find a voice, a place where shadows are met with light and silence is broken by courage. Where are you from? I asked in my message, because connection is the first step toward healing. Knowing that somewhere, someone else is listening, that we are not alone. As the days turned into weeks, I found a new rhythm in life. There were still scars, still quiet moments when the past whispered its lingering fears. But I no longer felt trapped by them. I volunteered at a local women's center, sharing my story with those who needed hope. I planted lavender and rosemary in the garden, watching the roots take hold and bloom, reminding me that growth often comes after the harshest winters. And Nathan began to visit more often, his smiles less guarded, his presence a balm to wounds that time alone couldn't heal. One night, as we sat by the fire, he turned to me and said, "Thank you, Mom, for never giving up." I reached across, took his hand, and said, "Thank you for coming back to me." In that simple exchange, years of pain and distance melted away, replaced by the quiet certainty that we were finally on the path home. This story isn't just about betrayal or revenge. It's about the power to rise, to reclaim, to rewrite the narrative. About the witch inside every one of us, the strength that endures beyond the harshest words and deepest wounds. And as long as that strength lives, there is hope. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe. Let me know, where are you from? Because every voice matters, and together, we are unstoppable.